Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so today we're unpacking a source that literally flips mainstream archaeology and genetics completely on its head. We're looking at a text called Out of the Americas, the Surui Ancestry of Humanity. And let me tell you, it tracks an argument that challenges pretty much everything we thought we knew about human origins. Right off the bat, the source kicks things off with a massive, provocative question. Think about this. What if the ultimate origin story for all 8 billion of us alive today doesn't actually start out on the savannas of Africa, but instead deep within the Amazon rainforest? Obviously, that's a gigantic paradigm shift. Instead of the widely accepted out-of-Africa model, the one that relies on early humans slowly trekking across continents and land bridges, this out-of-the-Americas theory argues something entirely different. It proposes that human expansion was driven primarily by the oceans, using maritime routes and complex currents to populate the globe. And the absolute focal point of this whole maritime expansion? It's the Surui people. The text doesn't just, mention this Amazonian hunter-gatherer tribe in passing. No, it presents the staggering claim that they are the precise, granular ancestors of literally every single person walking the earth today. The author actually refers to them as living ghost ancestors. The core argument here is that they left these extremely faint primordial DNA markers that act like a living historical record. They've been copied generation after generation, which means that even modern European genomes carry this exact Amazonian signature, just hiding right there in plain sight. Now, this idea goes straight after the established genetic consensus. You've probably heard that famous claim, right? That modern humans outside of sub-Saharan Africa carry about 2% Neanderthal DNA, supposedly from ancient interbreeding like 50,000 years ago. Well, this source takes direct aim at that exact 2% figure. Actually, scratch that whole Eurasian Neanderthal interbreeding idea because the theory completely rejects it. Instead, it claims that 2% genetic signature, it's actually ancient Native American DNA. According to the text, there was no ancient Neanderthal romance. That DNA spread globally through massive population turnover events driven by descendants coming out of the Americas. To make all this math work, the source radically redates the human evolutionary timeline. It pushes the Surui lineage incredibly far back. We're talking older than Mitochondrial Eve, older than the Denisovans and Neanderthals, and, get this, even older than the 2-million-year-old Homo erectus. It's just a total restructuring of ancient history. And it goes even further than that, challenging the origins of the famous Yamnaina steppe ancestry that spread so deep into Europe and Asia. The text argues that the time frame was simply way too short for this to have evolved locally. Instead, it proposes this ancestry actually originated on the American steppes and arrived abruptly in Eurasia via massive trans-oceanic fleets. So you're probably wondering, how exactly did these ancient peoples migrate across entire oceans to achieve that kind of global spread? Well, the source backs up its claims with a surprisingly playful piece of modern evidence. I mean, you really have to ask yourself, what in the world do a bunch of lost plastic bath ducks have to do with ancient human evolution? Okay, so it all ties back to this famous 1992 cargo spill in the Pacific Ocean that released thousands of plastic ducks. The text uses this incident to literally map ocean currents. It points out that these passive, floating ducks washed up in the exact same global locations, from Australia to Japan and eventually all the way to Spain and the UK, where these ancient Surui DNA markers are found today. The implication here is huge. It suggests early humans expanded super efficiently by just riding these oceanic currents and Pacific gyres, rather than trekking endlessly across massive land masses. And to support this whole maritime concept, the text points to Thor Heyerdahl's famous Kon-Tiki expedition, which proved that rafts absolutely could cross the Pacific from South America by utilizing these exact same currents. When a source actually sits down and analyzes the global spread of these markers, the math is staggering. It calculates that somewhere between 1 and 10% of all modern humans carry this faint first ancestor DNA. To put that into perspective, that means right now, up to 800 million people are walking around with the primordial genetic signature of the Amazonian Surui. The author also points to an even smaller fraction of the population that carries San people DNA. And according to the text, the math behind this specific genetic distribution completely shuts down the Beringia land bridge theories. It essentially corners the mainstream out-of-Africa model, leaving established science with, to quote the source directly, no way out. It is a super provocative stance, essentially arguing that blind floating plastic ducks have somehow outsmarted the rigid land-based migration models of modern academia. The author suggests that historians are stuck in this insular box of traditional thinking and that they desperately need to update their perspectives on trans-oceanic travel to account for this growing mountain of evidence. But why does the source spend so much time totally rewriting this ancient timeline? Well, because it's building to a really urgent warning about our immediate future. The text pivots sharply from ancient DNA to the rapidly approaching year of 2050, warning that 90% of global agricultural lands will soon be degraded, unproductive, dead zones. That's a recipe for unprecedented food insecurity. And this is exactly where the Surui people step out of ancient history and right into the present. Faced with these approaching dead zones, the source highlights how the Surui have completely transformed from victims of deforestation into global pioneers of sustainable economics. They're actively blending their ancient ancestral forest knowledge with modern technology to build a literal blueprint for ecological survival. Ultimately, the source presents us with a very clear path forward. First, it insists we have to stop ignoring this alternative history and actually rediscover our Amazonian Amerindian ancestors. And second, if we have any hope of navigating our own climate threats, we need to actively embrace the sustainable, regenerative practices they've relied on for millions of years. So we're going to leave you with this final thought to really ponder. If this radical, completely consensus-shifting theory holds true, is looking backward, specifically to the ancient sustainable wisdom of the Amazon, our only real path to surviving the future? It's a fascinating, deeply provocative perspective on both our distant origins and our very fast-approaching tomorrow. Thanks for exploring this source with me today on The Explainer.